Hi, welcome to Adoption Now, your adoption show. I'm April Fallon. Enjoy this episode. Welcome to Adoption Now, telling your adoption story on your adoption show. I'm your host, April Fallon. If you're new to Adoption Now, we are a nonprofit helping families understand adoption. We tell stories from the perspective of adoptees, birth parents, and adoptive parents. My husband, Noah, and I have 4 children through adoption, and we recognize this is a lifelong journey, and the adoption community is so important. We definitely need each other. You can find all of our episodes at adoptionnowpodcast.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're also now on Audible, yay, and YouTube. We are saying goodbye to season 7, and listen to this. I always trust God to bring us the stories in his timing. So I was literally praying for twin stories because I love twins. So it was kind of about me, but I love twins so much. And then an embryo adoption story came to us that we released a few weeks ago. If you haven't heard it, the couple had twins that were not DNA related. And the embryos were frozen I think it was 12 years apart. Naomi carried 2 embryos that were not from the same family. It is a incredible story. They implanted 3 non-biological embryos. 1 did not make it, but 2 boys survived, and they were carried as twins. You have to listen to it. You have to go back and just listen to that story because it will just blow your mind. And the boys are so adorable, and they're about to go in for their second transfer. But guess what? Today we have another embryo adoption story that also resulted in twins. Yay! So we decided for season 8, we want your twin stories. Did you adopt twins? Are you an adopted twin? Did you place twins for adoption? We want to hear all the twin stories, so you can send your stories online to us through our website and apply to be on the show. We would love that. Okay, so today we have an embryo adoption story from Alabama. Rodney and Mary Leah are attorneys, and through their infertility journey, they started a nonprofit called Carrywell. Carrywell helps couples that are walking through infertility, miscarriage, and infant loss through small groups. Rodney and Mary Leah, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Yes. Did I say that right with Carrywell? That's what it does, right? It really adds support for families that are walking through grief.
Yes, it was a couple of us who had been through our own various journeys of infertility and, had some experience with it, had some things we did right and some things we did wrong. So we decided to get together and put together a community or bring everyone together where we could help hold each other's hands and carry each other through this. And hopefully, everyone else can learn something positive from our experiences.
That is so great. We have a story coming up on season 8 where a couple from Colorado actually started something close to that, but it's just for the dads. The husband decided to start support groups for fathers grieving infertility and child loss and all those things, because a lot of times men don't have the opportunity to grieve because they're so concerned about their wives, right? And they love them so much, but they kind of stuff their own feelings down. And so having support during this time is so important before you get into the adoption world, because that's a whole nother difficult process, right? So you got to get prepared and have support.
Yeah, and that group sounds amazing. We've seen the same thing with our group participants, and the men are just typically wired to fix the problem, and they're so focused on, trying to help their wife and themselves get that child and get pregnant and everything else, that they never really spend time to work on themselves and grieve the way they need to. So that's very typical for couples walking through this. It's a very typical response for the men.
I love that you guys are creating those groups and support, and that you benefited yourself from that as you were walking through this. Let's talk about your journey. So why did you even get started in the whole embryo adoption world?
So our journey has taken us about 10 years to achieve our miracle twins. And having walked the infertility journey for about 7 or 8 years, I would say, we had never heard of embryo adoption. And on Memorial Day weekend of 2020, friends of ours had brought to our attention that we had acquaintances that had done embryo adoption. And so they helped put us in touch with them, and we had a phone call with them about their story. And they had just given birth to a little girl. And it was after talking to them that we realized that, embryo adoption was actually what we had been waiting for. We didn't know what our next steps were after trying so many rounds of IVF and not really getting clear answers on, how we could achieve a pregnancy. And, embryo adoption, after we heard about it, we realized that this was the next step, and this was supposed to be the step for our family.
And how did you feel about that, Rodney?
I was excited. I knew right when we got off the phone, because at that point we had, I don't know, 6 or 7 failed IVF cycles, and we had been in deep conversation about, do we do traditional adoption? Do we try another IVF cycle, just this time with a different clinic? And neither one of us were really at peace or felt comfortable with what that next step would be. But after speaking with this couple and doing some research, I remember that evening on the computer, learning more about embryo adoption. There was just a peace that had come over me that I probably hadn't experienced in about 10 years. And I was just very confident this was the journey for us. This was our path. This is the way it was supposed to happen.
So what was the next step?
The next step in all that was it would have been just completing the application process. And it's funny you ask, because our next step was needing to get fingerprinted for a background check. And we were in the middle of COVID, and it was very difficult to find any law enforcement stations that were willing to allow us to come in for what they probably considered a very trivial matter. So we actually had to travel some distance to a different city here in Alabama to even get our fingerprints done to start the process.
No.
And like you said earlier, you went through Snowflakes, right?
Yes, we went through Snowflakes. Yes, the friends of ours, our acquaintances that we knew had adopted through Snowflakes, and we went on their website, learned about it, and began our process to adopt through them as well.
Okay, so you're both attorneys. Did you think that the process was so interesting because it's a transfer of property?
Rodney, I'll let you handle that because you enjoy talking about that.
Yes, it was actually quite shocking to know that the law hasn't caught up to the science, and that at the end of the day, this transaction, as the law would see it, is treated no different than somebody selling someone a piece of furniture or their car. And so as attorneys, that kind of caused us a little concern. We weren't surprised at all that the law hasn't caught up with the science. But we were appreciative of some of the things Snowflakes did as a part of their process. It's not really required by the law, just to ensure that there is a suitable home there, that there's a suitable couple, that everybody's interests are aligned, and that their motives are correct. So, I mean, that part of it all was what was fascinating to us. But to see that, there's no hearing, there's no judge, there's no court. It's really just like a one-page contract. It was a little unnerving, but, we're very appreciative of Snowflakes and their experience and, all the different things they have along the way to ensure that everybody has a full understanding of what's going on, and that every potential situation has been contemplated and addressed in this agreement. For example, like if you have a situation where maybe you've adopted 5 embryos and you're not going to be able to use the last few for whatever reason, like they already know in advance how to deal with all that. So it takes some of the what would otherwise be a burden or stress or just another log on the fire of being overwhelmed out of the equation.
Well, this is what I think is interesting, is you're transferring property, but you have to get fingerprints and a home study done for this property. Like, you wouldn't do that if you were transferring a car. I wouldn't have to go get my fingerprints, right? So in one part of the law, it's just a thing, right, that you're transferring. But then the agency is saying, no, it's a child and you have to get this background check and you have to do all of these things to make sure that you're a suitable parent for this property that's going to be transferred to you. I mean, the whole thing is just hard to like wrap your head around. And I've talked to a lot of people who have gone the route that you have, and it's really for the donating family. If you were donating your embryos, you would want to know that the family that was receiving these embryos were a good family. They had a background check. They were financially stable. They had a safe home, right? It would give you peace of mind. So it's really more for them than it is for you guys, because this home study doesn't even go to the court, right? It doesn't even have to go through a process where they approve it or disapprove it. Just your agency is looking at it, correct?
Correct. You are spot on in all of that. As far as us, the couple adopting them, any of these little steps and hurdles, whether it's fingerprints or a home study, can, be somewhat of a burden and can be seen as somewhat delaying you getting to that point of having that family your heart so desires. But, we've done everything we can to look at it from the viewpoint of the family that's placing the embryos up for adoption. And for them, I understand wanting to have that peace of mind and wanting to know that a home study has been done and that these children, when they come to fruition and there's the pregnancy and they're born, that they will be taken care of and loved. And, you really nailed it. It's for the donating family. It's for the placing family, not the adopting family. But it was one of those things where we were more than happy to go through it to make sure whatever family chose us was at peace and knew as much as they could about us and the type of people we are and the type of parents we would be.
I have to ask you what other people were saying to you. Was everybody like, what? What is this?
I think they were thinking a lot more than they were saying, because on the outside, they were probably wanting to make sure they were showing support and having a smile on their face. But at the same time, especially for those who weren't familiar with embryo adoption, they probably had a lot of questions. They probably had a lot of concerns. But we have over time been given an opportunity to a lot of those people who had questions or who now feel comfortable voicing, how they felt initially when they heard it. And I can tell you it's a lot easier to get them over to our side of things and to see the beauty of this process, now that we have our two children and they see them. It's hard to argue with any process that delivers the two children that we have to our home, who made us parents. And we understand a lot of people may want to question the science behind it and the steps that we're taking to have our family. But at the end of the day, when you look at those two kids, I mean, they are just the biggest blessings from the Lord we have ever received. Yeah,
I agree with you too. I think it was a process for us to learn as well, especially for my husband. He was like, I don't know, this is really sciencey, and are we playing God? Is that playing God? But it really isn't, because ultimately God gives life. So you can implant, and if God chooses not to give life, he doesn't give life. And if he does, everything works out and the embryo grows into a fetus and a baby. And here we are, with children. And so we're not able to give life, but we're giving an opportunity for life.
Yeah, I mean, the way we see it, I mean, these embryos are life. They are already created. In the case of ours, they have been frozen for a little over 10 years. And, we're just the vessels that the Lord chose to help, start that process back up and allow them to continue to grow. And so, and I think we found, that a lot of the people who have a lot of questions or respond with, is it too much science? Are we too much playing God? They are the people who, identify as being the pro-life crowd. And so it's an easier conversation to have once you're like, hey, look, these things, life begins at conception. This is a view you have, a view that we share. And if that's the case, then you have to really look at this frozen embryo as a life. And, instead of criticizing or being negative towards what we're doing, you should be supportive of it.
Or at least learn about it. I think that's the whole thing, is that people aren't learning about it, but we get to talk about it. We get to share about it. I think it's absolutely amazing. I also believe that life begins at conception, but not all embryos make it during that thawing process, right? And so you're not really sure what's going to happen in this journey. And when it does happen, it's still a miracle, right? God has to still be in it in some degree because he still has to give the embryo a chance to survive through that whole process. So I think that it's just an interesting conversation, and I love having families on that have gone through it because I know that you're doing a lot of educating, a lot, right? And you're right. At the end of the day, people who are pro-life, who understand after they hear what you have to say that these embryos are sitting in a freezer, what do you expect us to do with them? Dethaw them and let them die? We send them to science. What are we doing? And this wonderful opportunity to have an adoption story through this is amazing.
I mean, it really is. We're just so grateful and blessed. I mean, that is the question that typically gets them is, well, what would you have be done with them? Because they do exist. They are frozen. I mean, do you want to discard them? Do you want to destroy them? There are some countries where that's happened. But most of those involved in the embryo adoption process that we've spoken with, whether they work at the clinics or, there's some of the agencies that help facilitate the relationships to have them adopted, like they tell us over and over and over and over again that it is their dream and hope and prayer that one day they don't have a job doing this, that all of these embryos that are frozen will have found a home and been adopted. Mm-hmm. And that's what they're working toward. And they have just such a genuine perspective on what it is they do and why they do it. It's just very eye-opening, and it just feels good to be a part of it.
Mary Lee, how did you know that you could carry?
So part of the process through Snowflakes is that you do have to have medical clearance from a physician that says that there is no hindrance or known hindrance to you carrying a child. And so I did have to go through that process. And so while we obviously had been unable to achieve a pregnancy for various reasons, there was nothing in my medical history. There was nothing seen on ultrasounds or scans that would indicate to any physician that I would actually be unable to carry a child when presented with a viable embryo. And so from that perspective, I was cleared, which was one of the reasons why we were able to continue through the adoption process. And so, for us, our story was we were never able to achieve a viable embryo. Ours always ended or arrested or stopped developing. And so, the embryo adoption process was one step closer to us achieving that dream of having children. Because the embryos that we adopted that did result in our twins, they had made it to blastocyst. They were at day 5, which is something that we had never achieved. So even just adopting them seemed one step closer, to us having a family.
I wish I would have known about this process when we were adopting, because after we brought home AJ, it was just so hard for us to find a sibling. We went through the foster care system, and a lot of people know our story, but just kept having failed adoptions. And Noah and I had never tried to conceive. It wasn't a part of our journey. We jumped right into the adoption world right away. But when everything was so hard, I think I would have been like, hey, what if we do, because AJ he's African-American, he wanted a brother that looked like him. What if we do embryo adoption and we adopt African-American embryos? Like, that's an option. You can actually do that. And I just wish that would have been known. I had no idea that was even like a possibility, And so just hearing this part of your story gets me like so excited, because I bet you guys were just so excited after the clearance and you went through all the homesteading, all that paperwork was done, and now you're ready to be matched. Were you so elated?
Yes. I mean, and kind of nervous too, because our process was that the placing family received information about us, and then they would make a decision as to whether or not they believed we were the type of family that they were thinking of when they were putting their embryos up for adoption. And so, yes, we were excited, but it was also, a little bit nerve-wracking as well. Cause you don't know, like, is somebody going to pick us? Like, what do they think of us just on paper? Because, they didn't meet us. They're just seeing us on paper. And so and I'm going to tear up because I tell people all the time, it is just the highest honor. And to have someone look at you on paper and think, you're worthy of my genetic children, you're worthy of my embryos. And, that is to us just, the highest honor anyone could bestow on us. And so, to get that call that you've been matched, and then to see information about the family that has chosen you and the potential for the children that you're going to have. It was, it just, I don't know, words cannot even begin to describe it. It was just an incredibly beautiful process, and just something that we will obviously forever cherish. Because of that decision, we now have a family and are forever indebted to our placing family, just for their decision to choose life for their embryos, and then, to choose us as those people, that couple, that get to have a family of their own because of a decision that they made.
I want to say too about Snowflakes. They go back 3 generations medically?
Yes, if they're the placing family, if the information is available, you do receive 3 generations worth of medical history once you are matched with a family. And names and stuff like that are redacted. There's a lot of privacy that goes into it until the match is finalized. And even thereafter, depending on whether or not you have open, closed, or semi-open type of adoption. But you do receive medical history, at least 3 generations worth, if it exists. And it's very, very detailed. So you are able to get a good amount of information with respect to kind of the medical history of the children that you're adopting.
Could you choose if it was open or closed?
Yeah. So one of the things that they will match you on is the type of communication that you would like to have with the placing family, and same for the placing family. They also make a decision as to the type of communication that they would like to have with the adopting family. And so, there is open, where there's a lot of communication, there are visits. There is closed, which is, at least through Snowflakes, there is no communication between the families. And if there is type of a medical emergent situation, that then is communicated through Snowflakes. That way each family would know, if something happens, with the genetic children or the genetic parents that they may need to know about, that is then communicated through Snowflakes. And then there's semi-open. And that can be a range of things that you would discuss kind of on the front end before you go into the matching phase. That's anything from you give an update once a year through Snowflakes, and they do all the communication back and forth to the families. It is you have email communication with your placing family, or maybe you exchange phone numbers or addresses, or so that is something that you kind of talk through as you go through the process, and you are matched. You are matched on that. So ours would be considered semi-open.
Okay. So you got matched with semi-open, and then you had to get your body ready?
Yes. And so for those individuals that may have gone through IVF, it is like a protocol for an embryo transfer. So yes, I did. So, I'd take medication, have shots, and then, once I thankfully achieved a pregnancy, you continue certain shots. But that's obviously the protocol that you would work out with the clinic where you're being seen and they're caring for you.
Okay, so tell me how your body did with all of that.
So, that was one of kind of the frustrating things as we went through our journey, is that my body responds well to the medications, and ultrasounds always look great, but yet we can never achieve viable embryos. So, I had really never had a problem with the medications. I know some people, like, they have they have adverse reactions, or it can be moody, or it can cause certain things, but thankfully, I thankfully, I have never had that. And so the good news was my body responded the way it was supposed to.
No, the good news is Rodney could stay in the house.
Yeah.
That was the good news.
I just want to add real quick for your listeners that my body did fine.
Your body did fine.
I've had husbands say, I wanted to run. Like it was pretty intense, but it's good to hear this. Rodney's body did great and your body did great. I mean, there are some women who do great getting their body ready. I don't know that I would be one of those women. I think no one would probably run, but I'm so sensitive to all medications, but I'm glad to hear that it doesn't affect everybody the same.
No. So thankfully, and hopefully in the future, my body continues to respond the way that it should. But no, I thankfully have never had, major issues. And good news was things have always have looked okay. It was just finding that viable embryo or embryos.
Okay, so let's talk about transfer day. Did they send the embryos to your clinic, and how many?
So, with Snowflakes, they used to have, well, they still do. They have partner clinics in the United States. So we picked a clinic that was close to where we live. Now I understand their process has changed a little bit. So if you already are an established patient at a fertility clinic, there's some paperwork that your clinic would need to fill out, but you can continue to use that clinic. So when we went through it, we did have to choose a partner clinic. They're several hours away, but within driving distance. And so the embryos, so we adopted 5 from our current family, and the embryos were transferred to that clinic. And then we transferred 2. So, it was our first go. And we transferred 2 embryos, and we went in, and the embryologist and the doctor said they looked great. And they hoped we were ready for twins because these embryos looked really good. But Rodney and I actually both come from family of twins. Rodney's mom is a twin, and my grandmother was a twin. So I know for some multiples can seem a little daunting, but it was actually, I don't know, it's something that we'd always wanted. So when they said that, I was like, oh, I really hope that's true. And the Lord provided. So, we waited a while, but we got a double portion for our wait. So both embryos did implant and develop normally. To be pregnant with twins, it was, I don't say it was an easy pregnancy, but it was wonderful. It was magical. I embraced all aspects of it, even the sickness, because to me, it just confirmed everything was going how it was supposed to. And we achieved a pregnancy and gave birth. I gave birth to our twins, Dalton and Mary Elizabeth, on December 23rd.
Oh,
so
my gosh.
They were born right before Christmas of 2022.
What a great Christmas. Well, was it a great Christmas? Did you have to stay in the hospital a little bit?
We just had to stay in the hospital a little while. So our first Christmas all together as a family was spent in the hospital. But this year was our first Christmas at home, and it was awesome. It was amazing. It was just amazing. But some people are like, oh, your poor kids are born near Christmas, and I just selfishly though I kind of like it because there is no other gift that I could receive on earth than these children. Mm-hmm. And so, I love that each year that their birthday is just right before Christmas because I will never need anything else for Christmas. I get to celebrate them and their little lives. And it's really just the best Christmas gift that I'll be able to celebrate every year as they continue to grow.
And how much do they weigh?
currently, how much do they weigh?
Oh, no.
How much do they weigh at birth?
Yeah. Like, did you carry full term?
Yeah. So they were born at 37 weeks and 1 day. So I was technically term. And Dalton was 5 pounds, 15 ounces, and Mary Elizabeth was 5 pounds, 13 ounces. We thought the last ultrasound had showed she was the second coming twin, and the last ultrasound had showed that she was over 6 pounds, but that proved to be not quite right. Her brother was just a wee bit bigger than her.
Oh my gosh, that is so adorable. And they're biological.
Yes, they are biological. They are biological. Yes, so they are biological siblings.
I want to say this, if you're listening and you're trying to take down all this information, make sure that your doctor, if you want twins, make sure that they will transfer 2 embryos. I know some doctors, they don't do that. They only want to do one. If you want twins, they're just like, well, I hope that embryo splits into 2 because I am not transferring 2. So make sure that your doctor is okay with that. And the last couple we had, the doctor transferred 3. So it's different between every clinic, but that's a question you want to ask.
Yes, that is something that you need to have a conversation with about your healthcare provider. And there are other factors too. I think that, the woman's health, her age, there are a whole host of factors that go into, a decision as to the number of embryos. And then, like you said, there's some clinics where they will only transfer 1.
You have 3 left. What are you guys going to do?
So we have an upcoming transfer. We are planning to transfer their siblings. So all 5 of the embryos are from the same genetic parent. So they are all siblings. So we will see. We have an upcoming transfer scheduled. We're very excited about it. And, we'll see. I love how you put it earlier. I tell people all the time, whether they're going through IVF or now with this embryo adoption, that, their science only plays a certain factor in all of this, because at the end of the day, whether an embryo implants and you get pregnant, a doctor can't do that. Mm-hmm. They can place it inside of you. And so, Lord willing, we will have more children, and Dalton and Mary Elizabeth will have more siblings. But we will see. That is, we're doing all that we can do. But at the end of the day, whether or not our remaining embryos implant, is not up to us. So, but we are very excited.
Will you transfer all 3?
No, we will not transfer all 3.
2?
Plan is 2. So, we'll say, like you said, we'll have to see, if they survive the thaw, what that looks like. But hopefully, we would like to transfer. We would like to transfer 2.
I guess my bigger question is, when you adopt 5, are you prepared for 5 kids? That's really what my question is, I think. Like, are you wanting 5 kids? Or are you, does a couple say yes because one could not make it? But in your mind, are you like, if we take 5, we're saying yes to 5 children?
Well, I would say that's something Snowflakes does a good job of helping you determine, is they ask you on the front end during the matching call, like, how many children is ideal for you, and then based on that and their experience and the statistics, they tell you how many they would recommend adopting. But ultimately, it's up to you. And I would suggest to anyone, if you're like us going to adopt 5, you should at least ask yourself, if all of these work out and they all result in a pregnancy and a live birth and 5 children, are you okay with that? Mm-hmm. And in our case, we are. I mean, we both are always kind of dreamed of having somewhere between 2 and 4 kids. And, if we end up with 5, then we end up with 5. But that is something that Snowflakes on.
Right. Because if you said no, then you might end up with the same situation as the donating family, right? If you are done with 4, then you have 1 embryo left over, then you are the donating family.
Well, you can be. That's something that's in that contract we were talking about earlier. That Snowflakes, again, one of those issues that they have experienced and help you plan for is the contract between you as the adopting family and then the placing family is what happens if you do not transfer all of them. And one of the conditions could be, like you just explained, where we become the placing family and we select who will adopt the remaining embryo or embryos. And then the other option would be for them to, like property, revert back to the original placing family. And in our case, that's what the agreement would be, is they wanted the right to select who would adopt any embryos that we didn't use. But at the same time, we knew our plan, short of Mary Leah being advised by doctors for some health reason not to, our plan was always to, transfer all 5 of them, over time.
And I just want to add that, Snowflakes does do a good job of asking on the front end how many children that you want. And they look at a number of things, but then they'll say, well, statistically speaking, if you want X number of kids, then you should consider adopting this number of embryos, because, you can transfer some, you may not achieve a pregnancy. You may achieve a pregnancy, but it's more of a chemical, or you miscarry early. And so, or there may be something in the thawing process so that you may unfortunately, lose an embryo in the thawing process. So yes, you should always say, if I adopt this number of embryos, we should be comfortable with having that many kids. Statistically speaking, you're unlikely to end up with that many kids. But it is possible. So you do need to be, you need to be prepared for that as you adopt embryos. And so, we had a very successful first cycle, and we'll see what happens with the remaining ones.
Oh my goodness. I can't wait for you guys. We are so excited. And when you have another set of twins, you're going to have to come back on. Double the twins. That's so.
Yes, I was just about to say, let's do this again in 2 years.
Yes.
When we have 5 kids.
Yeah, exactly. My last question for you is, did you send pictures to, I say donating family, but is the right term placing family? Did you send pictures to them?
Either terminology is fine. And yes, we do have some communication with them. And so, yes, we have sent them photos of the kids and do update them. We do have some communication with them and provide them updates and photographs.
Do they look like their siblings?
Yes.
I'll answer that, because we were actually having this conversation with them via email back in December around our kid's birthday. We sent them some photos, on their birthday, and they had sent us an email wishing them happy birthday. And it came up that both couples apparently spend some time looking at the photos and comparing them and noticing the resemblances between all of them. So yeah, I think especially as our kids' facial features and everything begin to develop out of that baby phase and into the toddler phase, you can see some resemblances between them. And it's really cool. It's neat. It's heartwarming, because that they do have some other siblings out there. And it's very beautiful and wonderful that we have the communication with the placing family that we do, so that, we can keep them up to date on what's going on with Mary Elizabeth and Dalton. And it kind of make sure that we're at least letting them know all they want to know, as far as how much we love and appreciate them, and that they're being taken care of, as opposed to them just being, out there somewhere and them never hearing about them or seeing them or learning of their development or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the siblings will meet?
I mean, I would think so. I would hope so. I mean, we plan to be honest with our children, whether it ends up being 2, 3, 4, or 5, with their story. And I would hope that we deliver it in such a way to where they have this desire in their heart one day, as they get older, to meet their siblings and to, get to know them. I mean, that would be something we would want, but of course we're going to leave that up to them. And that's one of the things that Snowflakes considered when matching us with this family is, both families both kind of expressed this desire that when the kids turn a certain age, that, should they want to, we would all help facilitate, them getting to know their biological siblings and everything. So that's our expectation. But of course, we'll leave that up to them. But we intend to share their story and raise them in a way to where we hope that will be their desire.
Okay. And how much total did it cost you?
Ooh. I'm trying to think. I think the whole embryo adoption process was probably like around $9,000. And then you have the transfer cost and Mary Leah's medicine costs. So it's probably, I'd say, total around $12,000 to do embryo adoption, which, seems to be somewhat in line with, a lot of the costs associated with IVF.
Yeah. Well, I think between 10 and 12 is kind of what I'm hearing. And obviously that's much less expensive than traditional adoption and can be less than IVF. And so I think that it's just good to give our listeners an idea of how much money they would need to pursue this type of adoption. And I appreciate you guys coming on and just being so honest and answering our questions. Your kids are so adorable. I can't wait to post these pictures. They are just beautiful. So congratulations. We're excited about your next transfer. Please keep us in the loop so you can come back on.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And hopefully some of your listeners will become interested in embryo adoption.
Yes.
We don't have a regret, but the only thing we wish we had known in our journey earlier was about embryo adoption. So thank you for the opportunity to share about it.
And thank you for having us and for all that you do to raise awareness on adoption all around. Because there are just a lot of families out there, a lot of couples who I know benefit from the education and everything that you do to raise awareness and help bring the people together who can, get folks, taking that next step in their journey.
Yes. And you as well with Carrywell. Thank you so much for taking care of our families that are going through that grieving process and making sure they get the support that they need to make clear decisions about the next step. And that's what it's all about is healing and getting to that next step and really pursuing having a family, not giving up on having a family. Don't do it. You guys know I always say that all the time. Your baby is coming if you don't give up. So this is just one more opportunity and just a beautiful way to have a family and to also give life. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to our weekly podcast and follow us on social media. I'll let you know you're about to see a lot more AJ. Thanks for joining us on Your Adoption Show. See you next season.